All right, welcome to our Grimsby Heritage Advisory Committee for March. I'm Brian Riley. I'm filling in for our chair, Sarah Nixon. She's away this month. I'll call the meeting to order, and we'll start off with Grimsby is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of First Nations such as the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The regional municipality of Niagara and Grimsby stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands in which we live. Do we have any disclosures of pecuniary interest? I'm seeing none. And I'm going to ask for an approval of the agenda for tonight. Councillor Fabio. And a seconder. All in favor? It's going to be moving back and forth here.
I looked it over. There's nothing contentious, so you can count me as a second.
All right. And then any comments on the previous minutes from our February 11th meeting? Okay. Can I have a mover? Amy? And a second by Nick. All in favor? And that's carried. Right. So we have no verbal updates for tonight, so we're going to move right into our memorandums, and I'll turn it over to Bianca for our first one.
Thank you, through you, the chair. So the first item for the memorandum is a street name request for 911 Kerman Avenue. So during the February 13th, 2024 meeting, the committee selected Gerbera and Van Geese as the proposed street names. Those were approved by council. However, we've just recently received a request from the property owner as he would like to change one of the names to further honor the Van Geese family. They are proposing that the the street name for Gerbera be updated to Brian's Way. And just a reminder to the committee, I know we talked about the Van Geese family, but they owned this property for 60 years and operated one of the largest cut flower operations in the province. The family has since moved on from this location, but they are still in Grimsby operating their business. And the president of Van Geese Bros Greenhouses recently passed away, and the property owner would like to make this change to Brian Van Geese as the street name to honor his legacy and his contributions to this important business and an important part of the area's history. I did submit this request to the Niagara region. They approved the street name change. They just requested that we don't put an apostrophe in Brian's Way, and that's just for the 911 displays. They liked the suffix that was recommended as way. They thought it was appropriate, and they said for us not to use Avenue, Crescent, or Street. Staff are supportive of the proposed name, and we look to the committee to give us their selection of the appropriate name for the street, the condominium street. And then I also just wanted to again thank the Grimsby Historical Society for the research they provided that helped us make our decision initially, and then again here tonight. So thank you. Pass it back to you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Flavio?
Yeah, I strongly agree. Brian was a good man, and his loss was huge for our community. I've known the family for decades, and the reason why we picked Gerbera was because that was the flower that was grown on the greenhouse, and people who lived in the neighborhood, they used to sell cut flowers on the street. So that was why we picked that in the first place, if you remember back to why I chose that. So Brian's Way is great, and I would definitely, I'll vote in favor of that for sure.
Bianca, just one question for you. when the research is done on the names for these ones, does that get included in the official naming piece? I'm just wondering, we don't have necessarily any kind of background on this, and if we did, it would be great to kind of add that to sort of the context. I mean, obviously it gets sort of provided in as a memo, but if there's anything we could provide that kind of speaks to some of the legacy that goes on, I think it might be a good addition to this, but I'm not sure how that comes to life, if there's anything that goes along with it.
Through the chair, so for all street names, we historically had a book that was like street names of Grimsby that was circulated and explained to the community why we picked each name. But the property owner did let me know that they are also putting plaques throughout the development to speak to this important part of the area's history. And I'm sure Brian and the Van Geese name will definitely be included in that.
Thank you. Okay. I have a resolution resolved that the Grimsby Heritage Advisory Committee recommends that Brian's Way be selected as the condo road within the approved development at 9 and 11 Kerman Avenue. Do I have a mover? Councillor Flavio, seconded by Amy. Oh.
Sorry, just so can I speak to understand?
Yeah, do you want to come to the microphone?
Sure.
Loud, okay, I'm a contractor. So I just want to make sure I understand, because I'm not used to this. So the main road going in would be Van Geese Lane, going from Kerman to Sumac Court, and the U-shaped road would be Brian's Way.
Yeah, are you able to bring up the image of that we're all looking at here?
I got a drawing here, I can bring you to a colored drawing if that'll help.
It's in our report.
Hmm?
It's in the report.
Yeah.
Okay,
We can
okay.
bring it up on the screen here
Yeah, I
just
just
for
want to make
clarity.
sure I'm understanding it right, that's all. And that I'm saying it right. Am I correct on that? We're okay?
We'll just let Bianca bring it up on the screen here, and we
Okay.
can maybe just clarify through that.
Yep. Yep. That's it? Okay.
You're good with that?
Thank you.
All right, thank you for coming. All right, so resolved that the Grimsby Heritage Advisory Committee recommends that Brian's Way be selected as the condo road within the approved development 9 and 11 Kerman Avenue. We had it moved by Councillor Flavio and seconded by Amy, and all in favor, and that is carried. All right, thanks so much. Okay, and we'll move on to our reports. The first report is a heritage permit, and it pertains to Bell Park. And Bianca, this is over to you.
Thank you, through the chair. So we have a heritage permit submitted for Bell Park, which is located at 44 Victoria Terrace within the historic Grimsby Beach neighborhood. We designated this park in 2014 as an important part of the Chautauqua history, the Methodist campground history, and it being an important gathering space both today but historically. We also have some historic elements within the park. We have the original bell, we have a fountain, and we have a few older trees, and currently, there is some park equipment in there that's about 25 years old, and as a part of the town's programs, they update these when it is required. And so it's getting to that time when it needs to be updated. And then it also is being updated for the new playground and accessibility standards. The final design for the equipment was selected through the town's procurement process, and through that process, they incorporated colors from the surrounding neighborhood to bring it into the design. And then as a part of the Grimsby Beach secondary plan and the town's trails master plan, additional pathways and features were identified as being a positive thing for the park. So there's a new pathway that's being proposed. We also identified through the Grimsby Beach secondary plan an important attribute, which was the historic trees and just the overall tree canopy down there. And so replenishment of trees was also encouraged as a part of the secondary plan. So they're proposing to add some new trees down there. And then there's also going to be some opportunities for additional signage inside the park. And so we met with the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Department down there. We walked the park and made sure there was no impacts to the cultural heritage of the park. And then we also were able to kind of check out the condition of all the historic features in the park and things like that. So heritage staff are supportive of the proposed alterations to the park. And in order to enable the Parks, Recreation and Culture Department to continue to make adjustments as we finalize everything. The recommendation from staff is that the final placement of the trees, benches, and picnic tables be approved by us to make sure there's no impacts to the attributes of the park. The final text and design for the park sign will be, it's recommended that it be approved by heritage staff, and then the final placement of the park sign be approved by heritage staff. And staff is here from the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Department if there's any questions. And that's the heritage permit.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or any comments? Councillor Flavio.
Thank you, Chair, through you. So there was a discussion earlier in the year, or last year, the community there had raised, I think like $10,000 for tree planting. They sold birdhouses and they'd raised money for tree planting. And we were talking about different locations for possible tree planting. Is this going to be a location for tree planting? And if you don't know, you said rec staff was here, so I thought maybe they could answer that question. Has that been dealt with? Has that been communicated with the people in the neighborhood who had raised the money and done that?
Yes, so through the chair, we did have a meeting with Bob, who I believe kind of ran that whole birdhouse selling program, and we looked at a few different properties that he could plant. This wasn't one of the properties that he brought up as interest. We are going to try to incorporate some of the butternut seeds that they collected from one of the trees in that to plant the trees that you see on that layout. And then the trees that he did raise money for, we're going to try to incorporate into Victoria Terrace.
Are there any other questions? Amy?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I think it's a great initiative. I just had one question that was raised previously in one of our discussions with the Grimsby, the new development area in the park that was put down by the bottom of Casablanca. And just in terms of the accessibility access with the wood chips, there was a lot of limiting factors for people, once they went beyond the path. If they did have accessibilities, there was challenges with that. I was just wondering if that was a consideration that was looked at for this park. I think like the suggestion by some of the residents had been, it's almost like a recycled rubber kind of tarmac versus the wood chip.
Right, so through the chair, the wood chips that we do use at Casablanca, they were approved by our accessibility representative, and they do meet the standards. For Bell Park, we probably will be using some kind of accessible engineered wood chip. We move away from rubber because it is really expensive, and you can't replace it in any kind of affordable way. And they have a lot of issues with weathering, vandalism, things like that. So typically in terms of maintenance and meeting accessibility standards, we move towards the wood chips.
Any other questions or comments? All Right, I have a resolution then. Resolved that report HG 25-02 Bell Park, 44 Victoria Terrace Heritage Permit application be received, and that the committee recommends the heritage permit for Bell Park, 44 Victoria Terrace be recommended for approval subject to the following conditions. 1, that the final placement of the trees, benches, and picnic tables be approved by heritage staff. 2, that the final text and design of the park sign be approved by heritage staff. And 3, that the final placement of the park sign be approved by heritage staff. Do I have a mover? Amy, seconder. Councillor Flavio, all in favor? That's carried. Okay. All right. Let's move on to our next report. This is another heritage permit. This one pertains to 50 and 52 Park Road North. Bianca, take it away.
Thank you, through you, the chair. So we have another heritage permit. This is for the Gatsby Shoe Factory at 50 to 52 Park Road North. The property owners invited heritage staff on site to look at some of the proposed maintenance work they need to do and some restoration work. One of the main concerns for them was the roof was causing some leaks on the interior of the building, and they really wanted to ensure that they were able to secure the entry points or the exterior envelope to reduce any of that moisture coming into the interior of the building. And so as part of that, they'll be needing to update the flat roof. And then I also put in the report some pictures of like the parapet walls. And so kind of the weatherproofing that was used had incorporated some type of spray foam, which we typically don't like to use on historic buildings. It's really hard to remove, and moisture can get in behind it, and it's just not a reversible material. So we're going to be working with them on the removal of the spray foam, and they're going to do some proper membrane to make sure that the water is not going into the interior of the building. And so we worked with them on kind of a strategy to make sure that we're able to secure the envelope. So that'll be for the roof repairs. In addition to some of the concerns with the roof repairs, there's an old skylight on the 3rd story portion of the factory. The skylight is leaking a lot of water in, and because it's not a designated attribute and it's not something that is visible from the public realm, we thought it was a good opportunity for us to properly seal the roof and not have the moisture come in. So we were supportive of that alteration, and we asked them to photograph the skylight in its current form, and then as they're removing it, and we recommend that those be shared with the Grimsby Historical Society as well for their records, and we'll add that to the file. We also talked about the old tin smokestack, and so that's also causing water to leak into the interior system, and so while this is a protected designated attribute, so what our recommendation was that we allow them to remove it, we close up the roof, we seal it, and then have it be superficially reinstalled on the site so that you can still see it from the public realm. And then because we don't really know fully what it's going to look like when it comes down to do the repairs, we're just recommending that it be delegated to staff to work with them on the conservation strategy for the tin smokestack. And then we'll have to take a look at that time to see like what this material, the condition it's actually in. If it's something that's, deteriorating really rapidly, I think we'll have to make the decision of, do we want this attribute to live its lifespan outside, or is this better suited for the interior and they can have some kind of commemorative piece? So we're recommending that be delegated to staff, and we'll do our best to have it be retained on the exterior. And then if there is no option, then we'll have it be brought in and have some type of commemorative piece. And then the other piece that they wanted to talk to us about was the siding. So this is kind of our first time having like a actual hazard as an attribute. So the exterior siding is designated, and that's because it was intentionally designed by the Schaefer brothers to be this style. It's an Art Moderne style building, and when they had originally designed it, we have like the newspaper articles that speak to it being this light color because they wanted it to be bright and visible from the highway. And so we protected this siding because we wanted to make sure that it stayed with the intent of the overall design. But we knew that eventually we were going to have this discussion because the siding is asbestos, and the recommended approach for asbestos is to leave it in place and put the new system on top, or you can try doing some type of sealing, but you really can't clean it and then seal it. So because of that, we kind of worked with the property owners on a strategy, and that was that we would go with a new siding that was the same profile and the same bright color to really honor the original intent of the Schaefer brothers and the design when this was built. And so we actually have the news articles from when they built the building. So we're going to be using that as we select the actual profile and the color of the siding with the intent to be true to that while balancing the hazardous material. And so this is in keeping with best practices. This siding will stay on the building, and then the new siding will go on top. I don't know if there'll ever be technology to restore it one day, but at least it's underneath there. So that's the recommendation from staff. And we also recommended that there be a lot of documentation of while they're doing this work. If they're finding things underneath, we ask them to share with us photos throughout. And then because when you're adding the new siding on top, we need to make sure they're introducing air gaps so that we're not having the new siding causing breathing issues, and then we have the system rot. So we're going to be we recommended that we work with them for them to provide us with details of what that air gap will look like. And then because they're removing the spray foam, we also just need a little more information about how they're actually going to go about it, so we can make sure that the building has as minimal kind of loss of materials as possible. And then the other recommendation we're making is that as they're working on some of this restoration work, we don't know exactly what we're going to find underneath. So if we do see a bunch of rot and things like that, we're recommending that be delegated to staff, and our goal will be to retain as much of the original material as possible, but not hold up the process. The last thing we want is the roof opened up and then we have to come back for permits. So that's what we're recommending for this site. And the applicant is here if there's any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. Any questions or comments? Councillor Flavio.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I'm going to start by saying I'm jealous that you got to go into the building, because this is one of those legendary Grimsby properties that, we used to tell stories about when we were kids. And so, there was about it being haunted and all kinds of things like that. But I'm a grown up and I don't believe in those things anymore. But my question is related to the long-term plan for the building. If we have any idea of what the long-term plan is for reuse or for change in use, do we have any? I'm glad the building's being preserved. I'm glad that the roof is going to be fixed, and I'm sad that the siding can't be either taken off or restored. But I'd like to know what's going to happen with the building in the long run if we have any idea of that.
Through the chair, I know Kayla is online if she wants to add anything. She's representing the property owner. My understanding from our discussions is step one is they really want to secure the envelope. They don't want any deterioration happening, and they're working towards coming up with a good strategy for it. I think depending on the use, it can get kind of complicated, and that's because of the CN lands right adjacent to it. But we've had a lot of positive conversations, and we've worked really well collaboratively. And I think we both agree we want a really good use for the building. And so they're just having water issues right now, so they want to just secure it. And I think, just bring it back to life is kind of the idea.
If I may, yeah, thank you for that, Bianca. There are no long-term plans, but yes, exactly as Bianca stated, we're just looking to secure the building and make sure that the integrity is there and it's in good shape for whatever may happen in the future with the property.
A couple questions from me. First one, the 7 conditions, we already discussed those with the homeowner or the representative. Are they on board in general?
Yes, 100%. Yep, definitely.
Thank you. And then just a couple, Bianca, you mentioned there about the tin smokestack. You made a comment about it live its lifespan outside. Maybe just clear it out. I'm not sure I totally follow on that piece.
Through the chair. So the idea is that like this tin is slowly breaking down, being exposed to the elements. And so I think the question is, do we leave it up there and just let it decay down, or do we want to pull that in and make that a part of the interior, and then they can have like a commemorative piece, whatever they end up using it for, that commemorative piece is inside. I personally would like to see it stay with the building, and so if we do have to pull it in, I think that is probably the best thing to do from a conservation standpoint. But I guess another school of thought could be, do we leave it there and let it, live its lifespan? But our recommendation is that it would come in. Yeah.
Thank you. And then just one last one. The siding's unique, and so if I'm understanding correctly, there's going to be a new siding that's compatible, and you're going to use some of the old images to try to match color profile as much as possible, and there's going to be an air gap there. How thick is it going to be? Like, is it going to create like a much thicker layer on the outer side? Will it have any impact on the other attributes like the windows, and just sort of, I don't know, I'm kind of picturing it as like if it's a couple inches thick, and maybe that's an exaggeration to the windows offset. Maybe just help clarify that for me, please.
Through the chair. So yes, so they're gonna probably add some type of strapping, I'm guessing, and we'll want a sufficient air gap. We'll look at some of the minimum standards in the building code for a new build. Those will be probably the standards we would use for that new introduction of that new air gap. But that's, I think, why we want to work with them on the final plans and make sure that we're being true to the original design by the Schaefer brothers. And I think this is going to be a really good opportunity for us to gain more knowledge of, like, because we do have some other asbestos sided buildings in the town. And so I think this will give us good insight into like some of the more delicate ones we have of like, how would we want to make sure that those things are mitigated. But we'll definitely pay attention to that while we're doing it. And we'll just kind of take it as it comes. But I think that was a good point, like just like thinking of those other elements and things like that. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Before we move on to the resolution, anything further? Questions? Okay. All right, so resolve that report HG 25-0350-52 Park Road North Heritage Permit application be received, and that the committee recommends that the Heritage Permit application for the property at 5052 Park Road North be approved subject to the following conditions. 1, that the photographs be taken before and after the new siding is installed and before the skylight is removed, and that those photographs be provided to the town of Grimsby for their collection and shared with the Grimsby Historical Society for the records. 2, that the designated attribute known as the smokestack be photo documented within its original location, and following repair of the smokestack's entry point within the roof, that the smokestack be superficially reinstalled within its approximate location. 3, that if additional repair to smokestack is required, following the moving of the smokestack to repair the roof, that a conservation strategy for the protected attribute be delegated to staff to ensure that the protected attribute be repaired prior to its superficial reinstallation. 4, that if the smokestack is damaged beyond repair, that the protected attribute be instead preserved within the interior of historic structure to stop the further deterioration of the smokestack's original materials. 5, that in the event that the additional rot or decay is discovered during the restoration of the factory roof, that the removal of rotten or decayed material be delegated to heritage staff for approval. 6, that the Heritage staff approve the final siding profile and color, white, to ensure it is keeping with the historic Schaefer Brothers design. And number 7, that plans be submitted showing the repair and installation details for staff review and approval. Can I have a mover? Amy, and a seconder, Councillor DeFlavio. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay. And we'll move on to another heritage permit. This one pertains to 133 Main Street East. And again, I'll call on Bianca.
Thank you, through the chair. So we have another heritage permit application. This one's for 133 Main Street East. And this historic site has been designated for quite some time. There's a little bit more of a background to this property than the previous one, so I'll just quickly go over some of that. So this application has been approved by Ontario Land Tribunal, and there is 17 conditions associated with this approval. There will be a new mixed-use building introduced to the subject lands, and the historic house will be restored. I do have a picture of the restoration on the screen, and you can see the reinstated side porch, which is currently in storage. And then there is the new porch on the front facade, and that has been completely designed using historic photographs. So that shows the building, what it will look like. And then I also included the landscape plan to the right of the rendering, and that's just to show you all of the efforts that have been done by the Wendy Shear, who is the Heritage Landscape Architect. And the intent was that she brought back plantings that would have been popular during the mid to late 19th century. And I also have on there's some of the landscaping features. There's going to be some plaques out in front so people can learn about the restoration of the house. So one of the plaques will speak to that process, and then one of the plaques will speak to the family and the historic beech tree that was lost. And then you can also probably see that large canopy there to the left of the Heritage House. That's the replanting of the beech tree and its future location. And so that's just some more context of what the site's going to look like. And then originally we had, as one of the conditions of the recommendations of staff, I should say, was that we had an urban design review panel, and that's a tool we've used a few times in the town that's been very successful. However, the Land Tribunal removed that as a requirement, but staff and the property owner and the property owner's team still saw value in that tool. And so this past February, we started the process of doing the urban design charrette, and that's a process that includes, maybe I'll just give you the overview of what a charrette is. So a charrette is an intensive collaborative process that brings together experts and professionals from various disciplines to generate and advance solutions, ideas, and concepts on a complex site. And the idea is that you have everyone at the table and you're making solutions in days rather than months and years. And so as a part of this charrette, we had planning staff, we had heritage staff, we had public works staff, we had representatives from the region who specialize in urban design, and then we had the applicant and their team, which includes architects, engineers, and landscape architects, but also heritage engineers, heritage architects, and heritage landscape architects and heritage consultants. And so there was a big group of us that collaboratively worked using best practices to come up with a new design for the modern layer. And the idea was that they would work together and the heritage building would be the focal point of the site. Just to speak a little bit to best practices, the top photo shows the original application, and the building had been moved in that proposal. And then elements from the Heritage House were brought into the facade. And so the professionals kind of spoke to that tension between the heritage building and the new modern layer in the original design. And the idea was that we really wanted to calm that tension and bring the attention back to the heritage house. And so this is like an idea of like the colors of materials, where we're having a lot more of that contrast between lighter colors on the new and allowing the heritage building to stand proud on the site with the original orange bricks. And then you can also see that like the color was brought kind of to the height of the heritage house in one color, and then it was further lightened as you went up. And the idea was that the upper layer would kind of reduce its massing just using colors. And that's the ways that so when you have conservation and you're adding in a new modern layer, you want it to be compatible, distinguishable, and subordinate. And so this is something that's compatible, but it's distinguishable. They're not competing. You can clearly see what's old and new. And then your last one is subordinate. And the way that you can achieve subordinate is by having those lighter tones above so that the building still holds its prominence. And then the building's also being retained in situ, so it's no longer being moved. And so this is kind of the ways you incorporate all of those different aspects of conservation. And so you can see that now a lot of that tension has been removed. So yeah, that's a very complex process trying to summarize that for you, but a lot of professionals at the table, which was great. And then because of some of those changes that you saw where we were adjusting like the massing and things like that, I guess I'll go back for a second. You can see like how these were like put into groupings rather than just being one solid color across the front. You can also see like this area here would have been on an angle, and we wanted to like calm that down again. So that's why you're seeing in here some of these adjustments to the original floor plan. And so their heritage permit tonight is basically to approve like all these slight changes in the red. Like I'll zoom in for you so you can see. And the reason we have to do this is because when the application was approved, it was locked to the original plan, which is the black one. And so tonight, everything's going to stay the same, except they're now locked to this new plan that has those red lines. The full plan was in the heritage permit, the recommendation report. So heritage staff are recommending that all of the OLT conditions be a part of this permit. And the only change is that it now be locked to the new plan rather than the old plan. So, and the applicant is here tonight if there's any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. Amy, it looks like you're ready. Or they had your hand up there.
Sorry.
Oh, okay. Any questions? None. Okay. I got a couple here, or maybe just one. Can you bring up the slides again? There's just one part of the original image I was curious about, and once it's on the screen, I'll maybe point it out, as I wasn't sure what that was. If you go to the one that's the two side by side, or not side by side, but one above the other. Yeah, on the left-hand side there, it's sort of like the shaded part that's on the top one, but not on the bottom one. What is that?
Through the chair, that would have been the old tree. Yeah, so there will be a tree there again, but it's obviously going to be young. That one was 300 years old. So yeah, I should have mentioned that in here. We unfortunately lost the tree due to a thunderstorm. So we were able to photograph it in its landscape, and so we have all those pictures, but we'll be commemorating it through the new planting in the plaque. Yeah.
Thank you. It's great to see this property back up here. I mean, it's been a couple of years since we talked about it, and it's such a prominent property. It'll be great to see this finally move forward, hopefully. No other questions? Okay. All right, we got a lot here to go through, so buckle up. Yeah, maybe bring up them on the screen. I can read through them. You want me to read through them, though?
It's up to you. They're all the same, so it's up to you. There's only one change from the original permit.
All right, I might as well go through it here. All right, resolved that report HG 25-04, 133 Main Street East Heritage Permit application be received. and that the committee recommends the heritage permit application for the property at 133 Main Street East be approved, subject to the following conditions from the approved OLT heritage permit. 1, that the cultural heritage resource identified on the subject site be conserved and that the integrity of the structure be maintained. 2, the demolition of the coach house and modern front porch as they have been deemed to be non-contributing heritage resources that do not meet protections under the Ontario Heritage Act. 3, that assessments of the flat roofs be conducted and the necessary permits, repairs, replacements be made to prevent further deterioration to the heritage resource, and that the deteriorated modern front porch be removed to prevent further damage to the remaining original fabric. 4, that the materials from the coach house be salvaged and or offered to salvage companies to avoid materials going into the landfill. Should any of the materials be appropriate for the conservation of the heritage building at 133 Main Street East, that they be reused to the greatest extent possible. 5, that the new front porch be constructed as presented within the provided renderings, and that efforts be made to ensure distinguishability between the original fabric and the new fabric of the replica porch on the front facade. 6, that the exterior restoration of the house be completed in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act as outlined within the restoration plans prepared by qualified heritage consultant, and that the prescribed work be conducted by qualified heritage tradespeople. 7, that the access be provided to the heritage professionals on staff to perform regular observations of all vibration and crack monitoring devices, as well as overview observation of the subject site. Staff will reference best practices and property standards during their observations. 8, that the provided cross-section of the proposed foundation work underpinning be updated to include a breakdown of materials, and that it be presented within detailed specifications addressing mortar mixes and expansion joints. 9, that the original side porch, which has been dismantled and put in storage, be reinstalled to the greatest extent possible, and that as much of the viable original material be incorporated with required replacements made with in-kind materials, and that the efforts be made to ensure original fabric is distinguishable from newer replacement fabric, and that any Ontario Building Code update requirements be made in accordance with best practice. 10, that if any bricks are replaced during the restoration, it is recommended that the salvaged bricks from the modern coach house be reused and the efforts be made to ensure the strength of the replacement bricks be as close to the original fabric as possible, and that they be paired with a compatible soft mortar mix. 11, that heritage commemoration be incorporated into the green space in front of the heritage resource, and that the removed European beech tree and history of the structure can be commemorated through interpretive plaques. 12, that the green space be used for reintroducing interpretive plantings and native species that contribute to the streetscape, as well as the replanting of a European beech tree as outlined by the heritage landscape architect. 13, that the vegetative screening be added to the subject site in areas where there is a potential for visual impacts to the council identified cultural heritage landscape along the Main Street corridor, and that the vegetative screening include trees found within the Carolinian forest in an effort to maintain and enhance the Carolinian forest species found throughout the town of Grimsby. Number 14, that securities be taken for the restoration of the heritage resources to ensure that the utmost care is taken during the proposed works on and around the heritage resource and for any potential damages caused to the resource during construction. Number 15, that a temporary protection plan be submitted during the site plan phase of the development application, and that it be in accordance with best practices and completed to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning. And at 16, the new construction be designed and positioned on the lot substantially in accordance with the site plan attached as Appendix A to the staff report GH2504. And 17, that the barrier around the ramp down to the upper underground parking consist of materials that minimize the visual impact on the heritage features from the public realm. Do I have a mover? Amy, seconded by Councillor Flavio. All in favor? And that is carried. All right, and we will move on to the two designation reports that we have, and we have a new member going to be presenting those. Bianca, do you want to take a moment and introduce Mike before he does the reports?
Thank you, through the chair. As Brian said, I did want to introduce Mike before he presents. So Mike is our Heritage Planning intern and is currently completing his third year at Willowbank, Canada's premier conservation school. Michael has spent the last 15 years working with the Niagara Parks Commission as a historic interpreter and program coordinator, speaking to the public, performing historic research for educational programming, shooting muskets, and running an old kitchen. Last summer, Michael was lucky to attend the King's Foundation Summer School at Dumfries House in Scotland, where he learned more about heritage best practices and traditional crafts. We're very fortunate to have Mike on the team, and he has already uncovered some amazing stories, and his experience with war history has enabled us to better understand our local war heroes and the contributions they've made to our community, the country, and the world. Thank you.
All right, well, welcome, Mike. And we'll kick things off with you speaking to a designation research report that you did for 2A Baker Road North. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, through the chair. Staff would like to note that all property owners have been informed of the proposed designation of their property. Staff have heard from the owners of 10 Mountain Street, and they were excited to learn about the property's history and to begin the designation process. Staff would also like to thank the Grimsby Historical Society for all their contributions towards the preservation of the town's cultural heritage value, as well as Wayne Mullins from Legacy Research. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage value or interest, staff recommend that the property at 2A Baker Road North be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Staff have concluded that the property has met 6 out of 9 prescribed criteria of the Ontario Regulation 906. The property meets the criteria for design and physical value because the farmhouse at 2A Baker Road North is a representative example of the Italianate architectural style. The style was favored by many wealthy farmers along Grimsby's Main Street corridors towards the end of the 19th century. The position of the home on the former agricultural parcel is unique to the Main Street East corridor, featuring a much larger setback than the surrounding original farmhouses. This larger setback from Main Street is a trend that became popular within the town in the late 19th century. The farmhouse at 2A Baker Road North also displays a high degree of craftsmanship. The building is decorated with elements such as detailed barge boards, soffit brackets, and leaded glass panels. These elements would have been created by skilled craftsmen and artisans. The use of these materials was likely to show the wealth and status of Henry Baker. The property meets the criteria for historical and associative value because the house at 2A Baker Road North was built for Henry Frederick Baker, a fruit farmer, military veteran, and Grimsby's first scout leader. The building was also home to Henry's wife, Mary Elizabeth Nels, a lifelong resident of Grimsby, fruit farmer, and daughter of Cyrus Sumner Nels. The house and property are associated with Grimsby's agricultural success. The house was built during the height of Grimsby's tender fruit farming industry. As a veteran of imperial military service in both France and Southern Africa, Henry Baker's life is an example of how deeply intertwined Grimsby was with the wider British Empire. As the home of an officer who served with the Chinese Labor Corps, 2A Baker Road North is also a connection to an important and largely unknown part of Chinese-Canadian history. Henry Baker was also master of Grimsby's Scout chapter, which was among the first in Canada. Mary Nels hosted public meetings with the Grimsby Hospital Supply Club at the Baker household to make and fundraise for medical supplies for Indian Army soldiers fighting in Turkey. Mary would subsequently work at hospitals that served the Canadian Expeditionary Force during the First World War. 2A Baker Road North has the potential to yield information about the development of Main Street East and Baker Road, as well as providing insight into the success of Grimsby's agricultural industry. The setback of the home is a unique feature along Main Street East and was potentially inspired by the deep setbacks that existed along Main Street West during the time of construction. Finally, the property meets the criteria for contextual values because 2A Baker Road North is a character-defining feature of both Main Street East's 19th century residential architecture and a surviving element of its historic fruit farming landscape. The house's massing and scale, its original external details, its orientation to Main Street East and Baker Road North, and its setback from the road supports the area's residential character and marks the agricultural history of the surrounding land. It was also built for and served as the longtime residence of the family for whom Baker Road was named. The house is visually and historically linked to its surroundings. The Italianate structure was built as the farmhouse for the Baker family farm and is a surviving example of the area's long history as farmland. Its size, shape, external details, setback from Setback and orientation from the road are all indicative of its origins as a farmhouse. Fruit farming was instrumental in establishing Grimsby as a prosperous township, and the farmhouse located at 2A Baker Road North visually illustrates the wealth and prosperity that resulted from this formational part of the town's history. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage value or interest and significant findings, staff recommend that the property at 2A Baker Road North be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act.
All right, thank you, Mike. Another incredible story to go along with a really amazing property there. Love reading all of these ones. I feel like this one even had another dynamic to it that was really interesting to read. I'll start off a quick question, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues on the committee here. You mentioned at the top that all property owners had been notified and that 10 Mountain had responded. Has the property owner for this property responded?
Through the chair, they have not. They were made aware of the process, I believe, about a year ago at this point, but we haven't heard anything from them.
Thank you. Any questions from any of the committee members? Councillor Flavio?
I just wanted to commend Mike, if you're the one that did the report. Again, I'm still shocked that I'm able to be surprised by new material at this point in my very lengthy tenure on the Heritage Committee. But the Chinese Labor Corps is a really interesting story and a pretty largely forgotten chapter of Canadian history. So that was a pretty cool bonus part of the report, which I really appreciated. So thank you for that. Thank you for educating us and for teaching us new things about Grimsby and our history. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Councillor Flavio. Amy?
Thank you, through you, Chair. First of all, welcome and thank you for that report. It was, I concur, it was very interesting. I just was curious, Brian asked the question whether they had responded, and I was also curious, is it a multi-tenant unit? No?
Through the chair, no, it's single occupancy.
Okay. A resolution resolved that 2A Baker Road North be designated under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and that the notice of intention to designate be issued in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act. Can I have a mover? Councillor Flavio, and seconder, Amy, and then all in favor, and that is carried. All right. Thank you, Mike. And we have one other property which you're going to speak to, and this one is for, as we mentioned a few moments ago, 10 Mountain Street. So back to you.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage value or interest, staff recommend that the property at 10 Mountain Street be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Staff have concluded that the property has met 8 out of 9 prescribed criteria for the Ontario Regulation 906. The property meets the criteria for design and physical value because the structure at 10 Mountain Street is an example of Anglo-Gothic ecclesiastical architecture unique within Grimsby. The main hall of the church, its steeple, and the walls around the northern and secondary entrance are constructed with a local type of stone called Grimsby sandstone, quarried by congregant volunteers. The structure at 10 Mountain Street displays a high degree of craftsmanship. The Anglo-Gothic structure is comprised of structural masonry walls built by the firm Gordon and Newton. The Schaefer brothers were responsible for the remaining 1928 construction, including the original stained glass windows, which were created by skilled artisans. The property meets the criteria for historical and associative values because the structure at 10 Mountain Street is part of the history of Grimsby's Presbyterian community and represents the community's historic successes and challenges. Built as a new home for the St. John's congregation, the structure represents the collective efforts of those 92 congregants who chose to retain their distinct Presbyterian identity and their faith in the continued life of their congregation. 10 Mountain Street has the potential to yield information that contributes to the understanding of the town of Grimsby as well as its Presbyterian community. It also has the potential to provide more information on the firm Gordon and Newton, as well as the Schaefer Brothers Contracting Company, who were locally prominent builders known for high-quality woodwork. The property meets the criteria for contextual values because structure contributes significantly to the character of the historic Mountain Street corridor and represents over a century of church occupation along Mountain Street. The church is a strong, tangible link to the long-standing strength of the St. John's Presbyterian community and their efforts towards the construction of their place of worship. The church can be identified along Mountain Street and Christie Street for a significant distance. It can be seen from Beamer Point. Its crenellated steeple and distinctive stonework make it easily recognizable amongst Grimsby's urban landscape. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage value or interest, the significant findings, staff recommend that the property at 10 Mountain Street be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act.
Thank you, Mike. Are there any questions? Councillor Flavio.
It's not a question. Again, I can't believe this hasn't been designated before. When we had a trails open one year, and I was in charge of Beamer Conservation Area, and part of the history that I was given of Beamer Conservation Area is the kind of pit in Beamer Conservation Area where there's a hole through the. I don't know if you know there's a hole. There are pictures. I don't know if you had them in your presentation or in the report or not. I couldn't find them, but there are actual. Oh, they are there. Sorry, of the quarrying being done on the site and the stones being put down the side of the escarpment. So they were actually kind of just shot down the side of the escarpment, but this is as Grimsby as you can get. The stone came from the top of the escarpment to build a church below it. It's a beautiful building, and I'm glad it's being preserved. Churches I know are historically difficult to get because they want to make changes, and so I'm happy that we're able to preserve yet another one of our historic churches in Grimsby, and I hope that we can get them all on board eventually. So thanks for the report. It's another great one.
Thanks. That's great commentary there. I have to agree that the stone quarry aspect of the story was especially unique, and looking at the picture where they're digging the stone out and using that, and then just the aspect of it, the community built the church. I mean, it doesn't get more storybook than that when you hear the community comes together, builds it, they take the stone out of it. That was particularly interesting how they buried the stone for later and they preserved it, and then they dug it back up, and I think it was about 30 years later they built the rest, they built like the addition, the add-on to it. There's amazing ingenuity and foresight to be able to keep that in mind there when they're building that out. Yeah. So echo Councillor Flavio. It's a great story, great report, and really interesting property that we have in front of us. All right. Any other questions, comments? I'm seeing none. So I'll read off. Resolved that 10 Mountain Street be designated under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and that a notice of intention to designate be issued in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act. Can I have a mover? Amy? And seconder, ready to go. Councillor Flavio, and all in favor. That's obviously carried. Perfect. Thank you, Mike. Great reports. Okay, so that concludes the reports portion. The announcements, I believe, Bianca, you've got one announcement to make that I'll turn it over for you for.
Through the chair, yeah, really quick. I forgot to add for the verbal update, just a reminder for 43 Main Street East that we ended up getting a ton of really awesome stuff from Wayne and the team at the Historical Society about Hugh Anderson, and this being Hugh Anderson's house, we thought it was really important that it capture all of his history. So that's going to be coming to the next meeting with another report, but because there's so much information, we thought it warranted coming back. So it'll be coming back, and then we can make our recommendation on moving forward with it. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Bianca. Any other announcements to make from any of the? All right, on that note, I will adjourn our meeting for tonight. Thanks, everyone. Have a great